Hey, my name is Tom Gerbrick, and this is part two of my parable project. I want to start by summarizing the part of this course that stood out to me and why I chose that. I think the part that really stood out to me was the fact that it's good to have a template for preaching, but it's also good to be flexible with that template. I picked this because this seemed to be one of the main themes throughout the text and throughout the course, but also something that I've kind of wrestled with personally, that I feel like God was kind of challenging me in a bit throughout this class. When I got my first youth pastor job right out of college, I started working at a church where they really had no outline at all. It honestly was loosely a sermon, was more a talk, and sometimes centered around scripture, sometimes had some scripture sprinkled in, sometimes was more personally related. And there, I feel like I struggled with preaching and figuring out how to structure a sermon. And so when I left that church and I came to the church that I'm at now, I came into a church that has really high quality, sermon structure. Where they're all kind of structured the same. The general flow is the same, even though there's more teachers. We have typically a big idea up front and then three main points. And as I started teaching at this church, it was helpful for me to have that outline and to be able to have a starting place with that. But as I've been preaching longer here, there have been a few different times where I felt like the template didn't exactly fit. I remember the first time I did it, I said, "Hey, just a heads up, I'm not going to have a big idea up front today for all of you taking notes," because I knew it was going to throw people off because that script, the template was so embedded in the culture. And so it was helpful for me to realize like there are times where the template is really helpful, but it was actually good affirmation to me to feel like I don't have to fit the mold every single time, and that it's okay and even good to change up the template sometimes, having the big idea maybe in the middle or at the end, or maybe even sometimes not having a big idea. So my parable project was on the parable of the rich fool in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 21 or 13 through 21. With that, the main idea of this parable is just being on your guard against greed, and not focusing on what you have, but stewarding your life, knowing that any day could be your last day. And so this was a really good parable. It was honestly pretty convicting for me to read and teach on. I like doing the 7-day devotional. That was helpful for me to find other scripture that's related, that ties into this parable, but isn't the exact same thing, and was good to be able to think through what are some main themes that exist in this passage that also exist elsewhere. And that was something I hadn't done before. I think a couple hard parts with this parable. Right away, Jesus kind of gives away the main point. So if you include 13 through 15, verse 15, the verse says, "Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And that's really the main idea for the whole parable. That's what the parable goes on to explain. And so in teaching the context, which generally you would teach before the parable, you kind of give away the main idea. And so I wrestled with that for a little bit, if I would include that part of the context or not, and if so, how to include that. Another part that was tricky with this parable is it's a pretty medium length parable. It's not really short where you can just read it super quick and just read it all up front and talk on it on the end. But when I started breaking it up and kind of working through the different movements of the parable, and getting different points as I went, it felt kind of short. Each movement was maybe 1 or 2 verses. And so with that, I really wrestled with reading the whole thing all the way through and then teaching on it, or kind of going move by move throughout the parable. And I opted for the latter. I went through it piece by piece and kind of taught through it that way. But I think with that, it was a little bit challenging given the length, where it doesn't necessarily lend itself to just one of those options perfectly. So it was a good parable, good class. Feel thankful to be able to do that. And I think the 7-day devotional was really cool for me to be able to do, because I've never done something like that, and helped me grow and think about how maybe to provide some extra resources alongside teaching. So thanks.